I hate Twitter. I think about deleting mine all the time.
A lot of the people on Twitter, they're children. And if they're not children, they're adults that act like children.
You know, Twitter is a dumpster fire. Twitter is absolutely disgusting. It was foretold in religious texts from before human history was recorded that one day an app shall release called Twitter that would absolutely bring the end of humanity.
People who think X or Y. People who pretty much just can't see the other side, you know, they're in like this massive bubble, if you will. They only look at like their problems and stuff. And obviously Twitter really enjoys promoting this sort of echo chamber.
I get it. Everybody hates Twitter. We're so above it. We have evolved as a society. We've got that big brain energy. However, I am still an internet noob. I believe, and I fucking love Twitter. I love it. So this is going to be a video on why I love it. And yes, I'm going to be referring to some Aristotle. Fuck yes. Bring it on. So I'm not going to be referring to a lot of people in this video, but please just don't send out any hate, harassment, bullying. Ugh, yuck. It's not the kind of cool I roll with.
So here's my big secret, my big cancellation. The reason not to like me in 2021. I love Twitter. Now yes, I'm a Twitter noob. I only recently, for this channel, joined Twitter, and I don't have a private account on Twitter, so I'm new, I'm fresh. I am willing to say that I might not be seeing the red flags because I'm still in the honeymoon phase. It is what it is. And as with most video titles that I come up with on this channel, I usually want to watch these videos myself. I type them into YouTube and see what comes up. And you know, when there's not a video, I make the video I want to see. So in this case, I typed into YouTube, I love Twitter, and I found a shit ton of videos dating back from years ago even, where people were arguing that Twitter is toxic, Twitter is bad, Twitter is terrible. Mind you, none of us really quit Twitter, do we? It's the perfect drug. And so this sent me into a journey of trying to find out why people hate Twitter. What's up? One thing that was very prominent is that everybody seems to hate Twitter right in the midst of the biggest controversies and criticisms that they could possibly receive. And you know, everybody has a different way of coping with criticism. Side note, just so that we're on the same page here, criticism is not supposed to feel nice. It's not a warm, fuzzy feeling. It is supposed to feel a bit icky. And it might not mean that you're going through a mental health struggle. Maybe, just maybe, you're feeling what we call shame. Maybe that's the appropriate reaction. Anyway, since we all have different ways of coping with criticisms and stress levels, Twitter seems to exemplify this type of behavior. Now, one thing that I do think is a reoccurring theme in Twitter land is the whole mental health issue. Twitter is for the most part an opt-in, opt-out type of situation. Now, I'm not trying to make the argument that you should sign up for or join or continue Twitter if it's not something that you're into or that you wouldn't want to start already. What I am saying is that I fucking love it. But I also really like heights and climbing things and being in claustrophobic spaces, and I know that's not for everybody. But usually it's a you do you kind of basis, right? If you don't like heights, don't climb a tower. Don't get on top of the tower and then tell everybody how you actually have phobias of heights and now you want the rest of us to be aware of it. Don't do that. No. One YouTuber that I particularly enjoy that clearly does not enjoy Twitter himself is Call Me Kevin, and he pretty much has these posts that go out every time he uploads a video automatically that just tell you about his new video, because he knows that Twitter is necessary to promote his videos, but he doesn't want to interact on it. You can tell, it's very clear. So it does seem like to a large part you can control which part of you is on Twitter and which is not. So that means that there's probably some impulse control amongst us. I mean, it is what it is okay. If you get yourself into hot water on Twitter and you can't handle it, then it might just be a you thing, right? Again, such a noob, much love. However, on the flip side, I want to bring your attention to asking silly questions on the interweb and how much fun it is to hear people's different takes. I'd made quite a few different tweets that got mixed responses, and not necessarily any hatred, just different interpretations of what it is that I made. And this is interesting because there's a lot of confusion. And what I saw many times when people do post very quote-unquote questionable tweets is that, or usually in the first few replies, somebody's pointing out that you maybe mean this, or chief, this ain't the move, this is not the look. And usually those people have an option of responding, right? They either double down saying, nope, it's exactly the worst case scenario, exactly what you thought, that's what it is. Or alternatively, they're like, oh yeah, shit, no, haha, lol, JK, what you said, that's what I really meant. We've seen all these types of responses, which to me, I mean, look, when I play video games, it's very difficult for me to make the unethical choice, even though I set out my intentions. I struggle to make my characters make unethical choices.
Drown the boy! Drown the child! Destroy the child.
And the same thing with Twitter. Even behind an anonymous or semi-anonymous profile, it's very difficult for me to act outside of my personality. It's difficult for me to make choices that I would consider unethical, and it's difficult for me to hold people accountable as if they are playing a character instead of this is who they really are and they're just showing me who they are, and I can either appreciate it or I can cringe at it. It is what it is. And the thing is that, just like almost any other part in this world, you can pick and choose what it is that you like and what you do not like. As I mentioned in the beginning of this video, when I typed into YouTube that I love Twitter, and YouTube told me no. Here's all the reasons why everybody else disagrees with you, why you are so wrong, please check yourself. I stumbled on this old video made by PewDiePie, in which he actually presents a pretty clear argument as to why Twitter is probably the worst place in the world. And you know what? Fucking A, I am here for it. Let's analyze this argument. And I also just want to say that I really do like PewDiePie, and I like that he went this route with it. So yes, let's dive into Aristotle's virtue ethics.
Contrasting this using sports as an example, previously we have for thousands of years rewarded the winners, the people who act, the ones who run the fastest, swim the fastest, score the most goals, etc., etc. We don't reward the ones who say they run the fastest. But thanks to social media, this has somewhat become backwards. You get rewarded for saying things that make you seem virtuous rather than acting on it. Obviously, this is not nearly to the same extent, but it explains why the site has become such a cesspool of opinion, and how more often than not, the people who boast about being virtuous often reveals to be hiding the fact that through action, they are not. I feel like there's so many YouTubers I could call out.
That is a more nuanced take that a lot of people have not had about Twitter. So what PewDiePie did instead is he relied on Aristotle's virtue ethics. So I'm just going to quickly go over what those virtue ethics actually entail, what they are, and then PewDiePie's argument as to, why it means that he hates Twitter now. And then I'm just going to argue why he's wrong, and Aristotle can also go fuck himself, So in the shortest of explanations, Aristotle is an ancient Greek philosopher, and he wanted to find the purpose of being truly human. So for example, a flower would be truly a flower if it grows and becomes a flower, right? So a flower who is a seed and fails to grow into a flower has failed at the art of being a flower. So he asked himself, what is the point of being human? And he came up with this whole thing about eudaimonia, which basically just means a type of content happiness where like sleeping, something where it's like a nice, peaceful, relaxing kind of experience. So he wanted to find out how eudaimonia comes into being. So how can you truly be at peace? How can you basically sleep like a baby? What is that? What does it mean? And I think 1 + 1 is 2 here, right? So Aristotle argues in order for us to have a peaceful, clear conscience, we need to live a virtuous life. That is our goal, that's our purpose, and if we fail at living a virtuous life, then we have failed at the art of being human, which, would be embarrassing because that's kind of our whole purpose on this planet. So virtue ethics then comes into the question of how do you know if somebody is virtuous or not? How can we measure that and then live this truly ethical life and then fulfill our purpose of being happy and reaching eudaimonia? So, a virtuous person, let's take for example a crisis situation. If, for example, there's a house that's burning. If you are on the extreme of lacking the skills necessary to deal with a burning house, then you would be called a coward. Right? So you want to be brave, but if you are too brave, then you as a civilian would decide to run into that burning house and try and save everybody. And from the outside, it might look like a brave act, but it's actually very foolish because you are not capable. It's not within your capabilities at that time and moment as a civilian to be able to do that kind of thing. So a good median, a middle ground would be to be a civilian and then phone the appropriate authorities to come and sort out the crisis at hand. So in other words, Aristotle is arguing for a golden mean. We should not be on the extreme of lacking virtuous skills, and we should not be on the other extreme of having them in excess. If you are a confident person, then you can speak when you need to speak. You can also remain quiet when you need to listen when somebody else is speaking who is more knowledgeable. And also you're not too arrogant, right? So you don't just let everybody walk all over you and you don't walk over everybody else. You're just in the middle, confident, your truest self. So that's the point of virtue ethics. That's the absolute best summary I can come up with. The idea is to find the golden mean in every situation.
I hate Twitter. I think about deleting mine all the time. What I don't like is the constant posturing that goes on there. People just can't seem to help themselves from pointing out what is good and what is bad, or how others are bad and you are good, to a point where it almost becomes fiction just to satisfy this need. And I don't mind that this happens. I understand that it does. But what annoys me most about it is that it gets rewarded. Through social media, we get likes, we get engagement by boasting about certain things. It's very popular. A classic example could be J.K. Rowling changing the sexual identity retroactively on her characters as a way to posture for social virtue points. This, to me, is a good example because most understand that it's complete bullshit, but it's not always easy to tell what is genuine online.
And essentially, then, what PewDiePie is arguing is that we as human beings, because we suck, right? We're just fucking terrible, and he's not even wrong here. Man, give it up to Pewds. He's a good one. Anyway, his point is that we basically suck, and because we suck, Twitter, this app which is basically like this cosmos of people on the World Wide Web, it just kind of exemplifies all our worst traits. So, for example, we tend to praise the idea of dogpiling. We tend to add on to people. I mean, and this is very obvious in the fact that we just dogpile every single time. There's no drama that gets the adequate amount of response from the community. There's no, we do not accept this and now we move on. There's, we don't accept this and we don't accept that. And by the way, 5 years ago, you also did something that was low-key not that great. So we're just going to doubly cancel you on that. And then a week later, 7 more commentators are coming out with their hot takes and videos and private interviews, and you are done. You are cancelled. There's no moderation for it. That's the point. It's not, the crime doesn't fit the punishment. So because we are not virtuous human beings, we cannot act with restraint and moderation. Twitter is not a great platform. So in itself, Twitter isn't bad. It's just we suck and we don't deserve nice things. That's basically what PewDiePie is saying. He's saying that, so dogpiling is the first thing. The second thing is that we actually further encourage and promote this type of behavior. The reason why so many YouTube online fake as I'm Alex pedo allegations come to the surface is because people saw that in the past the great big giants on this platform who did find and expose pedophiles ended up getting a lot of praise and approval. So a bunch of people jumped on the bandwagon and wanted to find their own version of Lion Maker to try and cancel people even more because they wanted that kind of credit. So the idea of dogpiling and adding on and trying to expose people is beneficial, and we as fellow Twitter twatters, we encourage this type of behavior. In fact, we add monetary value to it. We give them followers, we give them subs, we give them donos. It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. So basically, then the platform doesn't suck, we suck. And we cultivated this thing, and now we get to live in our suckiness next to each other because this is like a swamp and we're all just like trolls trying to figure our way around it and trying to see which one of us is the dirtiest with the biggest fucking mole coming out of our nose. So that's basically what PewDiePie argued. In summary, then, it's a we problem. We suck, we're not virtuous, and Twitter is encouraging our worst type of traits. It makes us want to act in extremes, and we encourage each other to do that even more. So it's a dirty place with dirty people that encourage more and more dirty behaviors. And you know what? I don't hate my boy Aristotle, and I surely do like PewDiePie, so it's not that. That is not my issue here. My thing is that nobody ever asks the pig if it likes the mud. My problem here is that PewDiePie never really considered that we maybe like the mud and the dirt and the swamp. That's what I'm arguing. So, okay, virtue ethics in itself has a few problems and criticisms. So virtue ethics rely on characters, not on general rules and society. So what that means is that basically you yourself have to decide whether or not you're a virtuous person. So you have to look at a situation and decide this is the moderate and appropriate reaction to the situation. Which sounds fine and dandy until you realize that things like cultural differences do matter. Just as a very, very simple example, some cultures are very loud and scream at each other, and that's the normal tone of voice. Other cultures are very soft-spoken, and in both cases the other one would be too extreme. So virtue ethics kind of doesn't care about context that much, and it makes people self-police, which seems fine. But if you are in a society, one guidelines and rules which we can apply to the majority, we want to say that a good, moderate, virtuous person does not commit murder, and we want to make sure that everybody knows that. So we enforce that, we put that into policy and law and legislate the fuck out of it. So Twitter is probably, you know, vile and disgusting and all of these terrible things that he says it is, but it does need to have policies in place.
So, if we follow virtue ethics, then that would mean that we become our own police in Twitter policies. However, he does argue that we are literally unvirtuous people. Hence, we don't know what virtuous policing would even look like. Therefore, we're like literally too useless to apply virtue ethics to Twitter. So we need actual rules and T's and C's and so on. So, I mean, it totally fails.
So technically, literally, it is an opt-in, opt-out type of situation. And this is a country where you can leave without a visa. You don't need daddy's signature. So virtue ethics in itself isn't really necessarily a great idea if you want to apply them to massive amounts of people, because, you know, who's going to be the judge, jury, and executioner in virtue ethics? So another problem with virtue ethics is also that it's a model, not an action-based type of ethics. So in other words, there's no rule of thumb that this type of ethics gives you. There's no, you should always tell the truth. You should never lie. You're only allowed to do this at that age. No, there's none of that. Virtue ethics is very much to each their own, and if you think it's appropriate, then you're right, it's appropriate. It's only when you act against your own consciousness that you are wrong. So if you lie and you believe that it's wrong to lie, then you're wrong. If you don't think it's wrong to murder and you murder, then you're not wrong. So that's a very obvious problem, and I think Twitter exemplifies that problem because people do troll within their own limits. Like, you will have trolls who say that doxing is the limit. You will have some that say that CP is the limit. It is the wild fucking west over here. That brings me to the reason why I have a problem with this argument. And it's not the argument. The argument is great. We love Aristotle, like...
Yes, Queen Slay.
Oh, my problem here is that as somebody who loves Twitter, this makes you reflect. Because everything he said is true. We do see these toxic traits, these unvirtuous, unethical people, like being wild and wacky and cancelling each other and dogpiling. Oh dear Lord, it's just a terrible place to be. But I really like this place. So what does that mean? The problem is that since virtue ethics doesn't tell us how we should act, but rather just arbitrary and abstract principles to follow, I think that Twitter is also simultaneously the best kind of playground to learn this instead of in real life. So if you want to find out what your moral code and lines are, then a place like Twitter is almost consequence-free. So Twitter could be seen as like this playground or this theoretical world in which you can find out where the ethical barriers lie. You can find out how to be a moderate, virtuous person so that you can apply that to real life where things actually matter, where you actually have a boss, and find out what are the social boundaries that you're allowed and not allowed to apply. So the thing is that Twitter is actually the perfect training ground. The other thing is that I think most public influencers and even people with a small platform as my own on this channel, I think we're petty, we're degenerate, we especially drama-related YouTubers and commentary and tea channels, every single person who has any kind of interest in other people's lives, I think we are definitely in the category of degeneracy, and you know what, I am here for it. There's no part of me denying that this is what I like and this is what I want to do and this is where I'm at, and there's a reason for it. I don't think it's anything to be shameful of. I think before we had the news, we had gossip, and this is just what we do now. And like I said way in the beginning of this video, when somebody criticizes you, you're supposed to feel an element of shame. because that's how you know you did something wrong and you can learn and grow from it. If you don't feel the shame, then the criticism would not matter. It would not change a single thing, and hence rendering it completely useless as a tactic. So I think the fact that people can criticize each other on Twitter, whether you have 1 million followers or 1, and it's all publicly available and anything could happen to anybody, levels the playing field with regards to who has a voice. It's less classes that way. I mean, there's definitely still an element of it, but the possibility that you'd be seen by the kings are still there, you know? We want to be here. We are here for the messiness. We are here for the drama. We love figuring out who's right and who's wrong and basically telling somebody off. And
I think the problem is that every problem that you have with Twitter is essentially a problem that you have with the human race as a whole.
Now, if you take it into your real life, you might have a problem, and I don't think it's necessarily appropriate, and that might influence your virtuous state of being. But since PewDiePie does know and like Aristotle, I do have a different Aristotle theory we can apply at this situation. He refers to catharsis, which basically, at the time, Aristotle was referring to the idea of watching a play and expressing all your emotions indirectly through the characters, seeing them go through their trials, tribulations, fantasies, lusts, all the things, you know. You go through the motions with these characters, and then you kind of deal with your psychological problems in that way so that you don't become a degenerate in mainstream society. And if we can apply that to Twitter, right? So I think it is kind of already happening. I think we're being our pettiest, worst versions of ourselves online when we think we are pretty much anonymous or we won't see any of these people face to face, and we kind of get it out of our system, you know, and that way we can learn, live, and love in peace and harmony with the people that actually matter in our IRL. And that, dear hoes of the internet, is why I love Twitter. But in the end of the day, I'm just a thought with an opinion, and I don't know shit about fuck. Peace.